Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I have another really interesting author to introduce you to tonight. Lucy E.M. Black is joined us, and she is the author of several books: The Marzipan, Fruit Basket, Eleanor Courttown, Stella's Carpet, and a new one called The Brickworks. Her award-winning short stories have been published in Britain, Ireland, USA, and Canada in literary journals and magazines, including Cyphers Magazine, the Hawaii Review, the Antagonist Review, the Queen's Quarterly, and others. She is a dynamic workshop presenter, experienced interviewer, and the freelance writer. She lives with her partner in a small lakeside town of Port Perry, Ontario, the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations. Lucy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to have this opportunity.
So I understand the Brickworks is going to be released in October.
Yes.
Is it about bricks?
It's about bricks. It's about brick making. It's about how technology changes a small community. It's a historical fiction, covers the period 1879 to 1910, which was a really important period in Canadian history.
Why?
Why?
Why was it an important time in Canadian history?
Because there was so much development going on, so much excitement. The impact of science and technology were really beginning to be felt. And small rural agrarian communities were developing and expanding.
You told me earlier that it was about the progressivist agenda. Is that correct?
Progressivist ideology, that's right.
What's progressivist ideology?
It talks about a particular ethos, very common at the end of the Victorian period, leading into the Edwardian age, which was the sense that science and technology meant that anything was possible. And you will know from history that Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, had the Crystal Palace in Britain, and he brought together all of the manufacturers of new scientific inventions, and they celebrated the ways in which technology was changing the workplace and improving the lives of the common man. And so that progressivism sort of came across the pond, and that's what this book is about, really.
And brickworks are progressive, or were at the time?
Well, the technology used to make bricks was progressive. So just to back up a little bit, I mean, originally in the community in which I live, which is Port Perry, our buildings in town were built of clapboard. They were built of wood. And several huge fires came through the area, wiping out the core of our downtown in Port Perry in 1883 and 1884. And similarly in Uxbridge and in Toronto, there was a great fire as well. And so what happened was people decided they needed to rebuild using bricks because they were less flammable. And there was suddenly a need for bricks. But transporting bricks is very expensive. So what happened was lots of little brickworks started popping up all around the country, and people made them on site where they needed them to be involved in the rebuilding process. And I was just really curious about how that technology was shared and how people learned how to make these bricks.
You focus on historical fiction. Why do you like writing about historical fiction?
I think historical fiction provides us with a moment, an opportunity to amplify a moment in history that resonates down through the ages. So this book, for instance, is about the impact of technology on a small community, a fictional community called Braymore, which is loosely disguised as the Caledon area, which I think you will know. But when they brought that technology into the community, there was a cost. There was a cost to the way of life. There was a cost to human life. And that cost, I think, is worth looking at. And if we look at what's happening in society today, we have everything that opens and shuts, and yet our oceans are being polluted by plastics. Our environment is severely compromised by CO2 emissions. So there's been a cost to our development. And I think when we work with historical fiction, it gives readers the opportunity to think about the benefits and costs of the kinds of things that they're reading about. And that's why I enjoy this genre.
Did you have to do a bunch of research into brickworks and bricks and technology and the era?
Absolutely, I did. I went to Scotland and did some research there. The book starts in Scotland. The two main characters are Scottish immigrants. And so the book starts in Scotland in 1879 with the fall of the Tay Bridge. And the Tay Bridge was the longest bridge in the world at the time, at almost 2 miles long. It crossed the Firth of the Tay from Dundee towards Edinburgh, and it was considered a marvel of Victorian engineering. They hadn't done a very good job installing it, and when they installed it, they tested for weight, but they didn't test for weight and wind force at the same time. So in December of 1879, there was a huge winter storm, and the bridge fell, and the train plunged into the Tay, killing everybody on board. The interesting thing about the fall of the Tay Bridge is the errors that were made in 1879 are still the errors that are being made currently when we read about bridges that are falling internationally.
Really?
And as you know from the news, there's been bridges in Quebec and Italy and India that have failed. And when we look at the causes for those bridge failures, they're identical to the fall of the Tay Bridge.
We don't learn from history. Guess we have to read it a little bit more. What do you think people enjoy? What do you hope people will enjoy about reading your novel?
Oh, I hope they enjoy the characters. It's a character-driven yarn to a certain extent. So I hope they enjoy the interplay between the characters. I hope they enjoy seeing the community of characters and how that community shifts and evolves. And I hope they also enjoy reading and learning about some of the technology that I write about. I consulted with civil engineers, I consulted with brick makers, and the book has been endorsed by those people in terms of the accuracy of the technology that I've included in the book. And I hope that people enjoy that. I hope they like to learn while they read, and that it's not too didactic, but that it's a fun experience for them.
And you've got a book launch coming up, I understand?
I do. October 14th is part of the Book Drunkard Festival in Uxbridge at Blue Heron Books, hosted by Shelley Macbeth. There will be a book launch. It's going to be a huge party. Everybody's welcome. And historical fiction author Rachel McMillan will be there co-hosting with Shelley Macbeth. And they're going to be draw prizes. The archaeologists, ASI Industries, who are the archaeologists who endorsed the book, will be there with a number of brick making artifacts. I'm very excited about that. So it should be a really good time, and everybody's welcome.
If people want to buy your book, how can they best buy it?
They can buy it from any independent bookstore. It's published by Now or Never Publishing. It's also available at Chapters Indigo, and then, of course, at Blue Heron Books. And
well, it sounds quite interesting. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back. I'm going to ask Lucy if she'll read something from the book for us. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Having an interesting conversation tonight with author Lucy E.M. Black. Lucy is an eavesdropper. She collects voices, dialects, and stories and weaves them into her writing. She studied writing in the undergraduate level and earned a master's in 19th century British fiction. I didn't know they gave masters in 19th century British fiction. Her short stories have been published in Ireland, England, the USA, and Canada in a number of literary magazines. Her published books include The Marzipan Fruit Basket, Eleanor Courttown, and Stella's Carpet. And on October 14th, she's releasing The Brickworks. The Brickworks is a book about bricks, and it's also about a book about the progressivity ideology that Lucy says gave people this impression that that technology and science could solve things, solve everything. Lucy, can you read something from the book?
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. Thank you. I'll start on the first page where the book begins. And the book begins in Dundee, Scotland, December 28th, 1879. And people are waiting for a train. The throng was impatient. Strangers had begun to confer with one another, crowded together as they were on the wooden platform. The winter wind howled as it swept up the steep bank of the Tay and along the frozen landscape to the train station. Buffeted by the icy gales, its timbers cracked as the roof lifted slightly in its struggle against the force. Ladies wrapped tightly in shawls and heavy capes huddled anxiously against their male companions. Many kept a hand to their hats, concerned lest a gust of wind rip them from carefully pinned hair. Clusters of men, 2 and 3 at the start, merged with other groupings and walked short spans together, faces to the weather, straining for a glimpse of the expected train. Most had already waited an hour or more. It must be the weather, they agreed. The wind has blown summit on the tracks, and they're working to clear the way. Aye, was heard as the men nodded in agreement. Returning to their wives and daughters, they spread the message and assured the women that the wait would not be much longer. There's plenty of men aboard to help with the work, they said. It will not be long now. And thus consoled, the women smiled and resumed waiting. A small stove was lit in the reception room inside the station, and the ladies took turns indoors warming their feet and hands while the men continued to brave the elements. After a second hour had passed, the men conferred once more, and one young man, not long past 20, volunteered to walk the tracks, to cross the long iron bridge so that he might seek a sighting of the train or any obstacle in its way. He would come back to report, he promised, and call for help if it were needed. A group of men walked with him off the platform and towards the long sloping curve of the bridge. The group bent into the wind, the snow covering them quickly while they walked. A few hung back from the steep embankment. "This is daft," said one. "Turn around if you need," shouted another. "I'll be fine if the Almighty intends," said the young man. The rest of his message drowned out by another gust of the strong, biting wind. The men walked a few paces alongside as he set his foot upon the bridge and stepped carefully forward. After a dozen footsteps, they saw him buckle slowly and clasp the tracks with his gloved hands. He fell to his knees and began to creep ahead. They watched silently until he was obscured by the dense snow and they could no longer make out his huddled form crawling steadily onwards.
And this is the train that fell into
they're waiting for the train.
But the bridge broke.
The bridge broke.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting. Oh gosh, I've got chills up and down my back. What a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I look forward to reading it. Unbelievable. Let me ask you a question, Lucy. You talked about the progressivity ideology. You know, today with concerns over AI, that it's going to take away all jobs and change things. And we've had, you know, people were worried about the telephone. People were worried about computers. People were worried about the internet. People have been worried about different technological evolutions as they've occurred. But I don't think in my memory I've heard such a concern about technology as I have recently about AI. What would your experience with the progressivity ideology and history and the brickworks tell you about our current situation, if anything?
That's a really interesting and timely question. Thank you. From my perspective, I think what's important is that we're aware always of checks and balances and the costs of innovation. I think artificial intelligence has the potential to change our working lives. And I think it has the potential to do good as well as to do harm. And I think that we just have to explore what those possibilities are and what those costs are, and to move ahead slowly, ensuring that there are checks and balances and that we are cautious.
Lucy Ian Black, thank you so much for joining us and telling us about the Brickworks, which is going to be released in October, but also that you're the author of the Marzipan Fruit Basket, Eleanor Courttown, and Stella's Carpet. A real pleasure meeting you. I wish you the biggest success with your new book. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Port Perry, at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videocasts are available on my website, briancrombie.com. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Lucy. I look forward to reading this book. Sounds exciting.
Well, thank you so much, Brian.